Hi, Stephen. Thanks for giving me this interview. How are you?
Very good, Stefan. Nice to see you, and thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. I think I don't have to introduce you, Stephen Wilson, of course not. Maybe the people are interested who I am, because we are doing this interview, they will find a link below this video. And we met in 2019 because you were the ambassador for our high-end audio show. Do you have some good memories to this show? How do you remember this show?
Yeah, very much. I mean, first it was a real honor to be invited. I remember just standing up and talking about my commitment to, high quality sonics, which is something I've always been very passionate about. With really since the beginning, when I really fell in love with the idea of being a producer, not really being a musician, but being someone that made records and tried to make them to a very high standard.
Yeah.
And that's still to this day really my number one kind of goal in whatever I do. So it was great to be able to go out and talk to people who felt the same way, because obviously we live in a world now where a lot of people are listening to very poor reproductions of beautifully recorded music through their laptops and their phones. So it was nice to be able to actually communicate with the people that do care about sonic excellence. Yeah.
Great, that's good. So we both are in a music business, of course, in a different way. We take care of the reproduction, and you create what we need. You create
Right.
we need to play our own machines. What we can see in our industry right now, that music is more important than ever. The people are sitting at home, they have more time at home, and we see that they spend more time listening to music. Do you see the same?
Yeah, I think there's two kind of sides to that story, or to that coin, which is I think there are more people listening to more music than any time before in history. There's more music being made than at any other time in history. It's relatively easy now to make music to a reasonably high standard at home. Just buy the right piece of software, and you can start creating your own music, which is wonderful in a way, because it means that music is returning to something that is universal. Not that it ever did become only something for the kind of elite professional musicians. It was always available to anyone. But I think now what's changed, it's much easier to record and to upload your music and to make it available to a potentially big audience. That's the big change of the last 20 years. With things like Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, anyone can essentially now be a quote unquote professional, musician, or at least have their music available to be heard by a big audience. The other side of that coin is that I wonder sometimes if people engage with music in the same depth that perhaps that they used to. So I think it's fair to say that there's more people sitting at home, definitely listening to music. But is it not true that a lot of them have just got Spotify playlist on in the background while they're checking their email or updating their Facebook page? Or do you know what I mean? So I totally agree with you. I think music is as much a part of people's lives as it ever was, possibly even more so. But I wonder if it's become slightly more peripheral and slightly more of a kind of background thing. And there aren't so many instances of people, I'm not talking about your community, of course, where people do this, but there aren't so many people in the outside world that are sitting, listening carefully with a pair of headphones, just concentrating only on the music without picking up their phone, without checking their email. That's what I wonder. That's what I wonder. Yeah.
Well, we will come back to this point soon.
Yeah.
Following your music more than 20 years, I'm still astonished what you're doing, because even I'm not a fanboy, but again, following you, there were no mishaps. I read all the news when a new record from Stephen Wilson comes out, and they say, "Oh, he changed his way doing this music." There a lot of criticism. Then I got this record. I said, again, it's a great record. Since 20 years, I loved all of your records. Again, I'm not a fanboy, and if this continues with your new record, with the Future Bites, and I think this is kind of magic thing. Where do you think the magic comes from? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points about it. Firstly, it's interesting that you kind of mentioned the fact there's always a lot of negativity when I do something different. There's initially a lot of negativity, and I've learned over the years that actually that's a good thing, because what that means is that I have evolved and I have changed and I have done something different. And part of it is like that confronting the expectations of the audience is what I believe good artists should be doing, you know, not just in the world of music, also in the world of film and literature, whatever it is you name. I think it's important to not keep repeating the same thing. And I say that because that is actually what most people do. Most people, they find a formula that kind of seems to be successful. And then most of the rest of their career is just repeating that and trying to recapture that feeling amongst their fans time and time again. And that's not what I've ever been interested in. I've always been interested in reinventing myself, changing, doing different things, feeling like I'm challenging myself as well as my listeners. And that initially always tends to provoke a negative response. But I think eventually what happens is people, a bit like yourself, people do listen to the record and they're like, oh, you know what? This is really different, but it's still really good. And it still has the integrity that I expect from a Stephen Wilson record.
Yeah.
And the personality that I expect from a Stephen Wilson record. And so maybe that's the real answer to your question, that I think I do everything in a very selfish way. And that's a good thing, because being selfish is also having the integrity to only follow your own musical path and not to think about pleasing other people. I don't think it's possible. At least it's not for me possible. Maybe some artists, they can think in this way. For me, it's not possible to be thinking about pleasing my audience, pleasing my listeners, because that way lies compromise and repetition and just giving them more of what they already like. And I don't believe that's what an artist should ever. That's not what that's not the way an artist should ever be thinking about what they do. I don't know if that answers your question, but you know, I am a very selfish person in the sense that I don't make my art for anyone but myself. But then I have this problem, whereas I have to then go and sell it in order to be able to continue to do what I do. And I've been very lucky in my career that I seem to have found an audience that, even though they complain sometimes because I change my style, they always end up going with me on that journey anyway. And that's fantastic.
That's great. Yeah. This answers my question. Thank you for this. And this context, I would like to know if you evaluate your music as profession, craft, or art.
Well, it's kind of all of those things, isn't it? I think one of the great sort of paradoxes or contradictions of being a professional musician as opposed to an amateur musician is that you have to sell yourself. You know, so there's this kind of constant battle between wanting to do something, like I said a moment ago, wanting to do something with integrity and only for yourself, but also having to make a living from it. I mean, I'm very lucky. I'm able to make a good living from what I do, but I've never really tried to please other people. And I've realized in my recent years, how fortunate I am to be in that position and how unusual it really is. And so there's this constant kind of like battle between the artistic side and the commercial side, the artistic side of my brain and the commercial side of my brain. And I think also, fortunately for me, I've always enjoyed promoting my music. I love talking to you now. I'm enjoying this. It's fun. And I love talking about my music and I love promoting my music. And I've always been happy to play the games that you need to play. You know, not all of them. Some things I find uncomfortable, but a lot of the games you need to play to sell yourself and promote your music, I've kind of embraced and enjoyed that side of it too. But it's never affected the music. The music has always been made in a little bubble of selfishness. And then when I finish the record, it's like, okay, I finished the record. Okay, how can I sell it? And I'll go and have a meeting with the management and the record company, and we'll sit down and we'll say, this is the record you've made. What's the best way we can get this to people, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, reaching as many people as possible with it. So it's one of the things I envy in people who don't do it for a profession, you know, that they don't have to worry about, you know, monetizing what they do. But as a professional musician, you have to monetize what you do.
Of course, yeah.
Otherwise you couldn't then continue to make the next record and the next record after that. And I can't do anything else. All I can do is make records. And I mean, okay, I can remix other people's records too, but at the end of the day, all I can do is make music. I have no talent for anything else. So I have to make this work.
Okay. It's good for us that you have this talent and that you continue with this, what you're doing. You just spoke about making music. Your next album will be The Future Bites. And it was planned that it should be out now, since one.
Yeah.
So you have to postpone. We all know why you had to postpone. What I would like to know: did you change anything in the album? The text, the lyrics, the whatever it is. Or also, I like to know the videos that we can see right now. Are they already finished, or did you change also the videos for the tracks? I'm really curious about this.
Okay, that's a few questions to answer there. Yes. Okay. So let me start. Yeah. It's funny because normally when I make a record, and when anybody makes a record, you don't have any time really to reflect on it when you finished it. You kind of finish it and you deliver it to the record company or to the management or to the factory, and it's pressed and it's out there, and you don't have any time really to sit back and be objective and kind of reflect, have I made a good record? Is there anything here that I'm not entirely happy with? And for the first time in my career, and possibly the last time in my career,
Yeah, hopefully.
hopefully the last time in my career, I had this period of about a year when I've been able to, like, I mean, I didn't listen to The Future Bites for 6 months. I didn't listen to it. And then in about June or July last year, about the time the record should have been released officially, I hadn't heard it since January, and I sat and listened to a test pressing of the vinyl. And I really thought, wow, this is a really good record, but there's one song that is not right. There's one song on the record that is not right. And it was originally the last song on the record. It was a song called Anyone But Me, and it didn't feel right. And I replaced it. I replaced it with a song called The Count of Unease, which is a much more beautiful, spiritual song. It felt better to end the album with that. But I was thinking to myself, if I hadn't had that opportunity to not listen to it for 6 months and to not be able to reflect on it, it would have gone out with, for me, the wrong final track on the record. Yeah. So I'm wondering to myself now, how many other albums I've made where if I'd had the chance, and I've never asked myself this question, I wonder how many other albums I've made. If I'd had the chance, would I have replaced tracks, changed tracks? It's a very interesting, you know, sort of like imaginary scenario to, you know, to ponder over. I wonder how many albums I would have changed if I'd had 6 months to think about them before they were released. It's probably best if I don't think about it too much. But interesting, lyrically, the album became more relevant, not less relevant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the one thing I didn't feel like I had to change in any way was the kind of the the artwork concept, the lyrical element, the subject matter all seems very relevant and kind of topical right now, which I couldn't have planned. You know, I couldn't have planned it better. That's just I wouldn't say luck, because it's not a lucky thing what we're living through, but you know what I'm saying. It's kind of, it's a coincidence. It's a coincidence that the album seems even more topical and the future is biting even harder than it was. Yeah, than it was when I finished the record a year ago. Sorry, I can't remember the last part of your question. There was a third part. Oh, the videos. Yeah. So, yeah, the videos, the personal shopper video was all planned before the pandemic came along. I mean, that obviously that's all related to the world of consumerism, which is not something that relates to the pandemic. And we shot that literally about a month before the lockdown started in March. Shot that in February last year. The other two videos, Eminent Sleaze and King Ghost, were definitely developed and made under lockdown conditions. And interestingly, Eminent Sleaze is a video about the last man left alive on Earth in the wake of some
Great video. Great video.
Yeah, it's a great video, yeah. In the wake of unspecified catastrophe. I mean, the kind of subtext of that video is that the world has become so obsessed with consumerism that the whole of civilization has broken down. You know, people are no longer buying food or, you know, paying their bills because they're so obsessed with consuming. So that was the kind of subtext there. But it does seem strangely relevant, you know, in a world where we are kind of we're literally living in a dystopian world right now. Yeah. So that was one that we did develop, and it was very interesting having to film that because we had to film it all with social distancing, and you know, it was very hard to think of ways to promote this record, you know, without being able to tour, without being able to do personal appearance, no record store signings, which I would normally do, no TV appearances, which I would normally be hoping to do. Thank God for Zoom and social media.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah,
I still think that it's good not to postpone the album again. Put it on later in the year.
I think, I mean, when we postponed the album originally, I mean, it was supposed to come out in June last year, and we postponed it to January. And I remember having the conversation when it was postponed to January, like, do you really think we need to leave it that long? Surely this is all going to be over long before that. And I think no one could possibly have imagined that 9 months later we would still be, and in fact, it's worse than ever. In England, it's worse than ever.
Yeah.
No one could possibly have imagined we'd still be living through this. So that is obviously a shock to the system. There would have been no point hanging on to the record any longer. And it does seem very, very much like this is the time to release an album like this.
Yes, what you have said, it's the right album for this time. It sounds ironic, but it cannot be a better time for this album.
Yeah, strangely, that is true. Yeah.
You know, for me, you reached even the next level. We just spoke about that I'm not a fanboy, but I follow your music more than 20 years. I remember your first concert that I have seen here in Cologne, and but for me, you even achieved the next level. For me, you're one of the best musicians that we have right now. But after I've heard the Future Bites, the next level is one of the most brave musicians. This is my opinion, because I put this in the same like Prince, Sting, Zappa. Now, I like to make it an example. After Sting split up with Police, he could have continued with what he did with the Police. What did he do? A jazzy album. Completely different. And it was successful. And he changed, and he changed, and he changed it again. And I really have to say thank you for this. that you.
Yeah, I mean, it's really nice of you to say that. I mean, I those people you've mentioned, and also some others I would add to the list, people like David Bowie, for example, and also some filmmakers, like people like Stanley Kubrick, who never really made a film in the same genre twice. You know, that's what fascinates me about Kubrick, is that this is a guy that, you know, he made possibly what is the greatest science fiction movie of all time. And then he never made another science fiction movie. He then made A Clockwork Orange. I don't even know how you describe that movie, a kind of bizarre, violent thriller, you know. And then he made a costume drama. And then he made one of the greatest horror movies of all time, The Shining. And then he made one of the greatest Vietnam movies of all time, Full Metal Jacket. This is a guy that never made a movie in the same genre twice. And it's almost like, if you think about the world of cinema, that's much more acceptable. Christopher Nolan is doing that now. I mean, Christopher Nolan's going from making war movies to you know, psychological thrillers, to space movies. But in the world of music, it's very unusual to do that.
Yeah.
So hop to hop from genre to genre is very unusual. And as I think we said at the beginning of the conversation, most artists tend to find a formula in them and then kind of plow that furrow over and over again. And I grew up really admiring the people, the Zappas and the Bowies and the Kate Bushes, Peter Gabriels, the Neil Youngs, people who constantly kind of, you know, in a way push their listeners around. You know, you think you're going to get the same thing again, well, take that, you know. And it's hard to do that. And I would say it's even harder now than it was in the days of those guys, because we have social media, and social media creates an immediate response and reflection of anything you do. I mean, literally within minutes, if I post a new song or a video online, within 5 minutes, there will be a wave of negative energy. I mean, positive energy too, but there'll also be a lot of people immediately, this is not what we wanted. Stephen Wilson has sold out. Where's the classic rock? Where, you know, this is pop. How dare he make pop? And that is something that the people like David Bowie and Kate Bush and Frank Zappa never had to endure that. They never had to do. So it's even harder now. So brave is a nice word. I feel like it's more kind of, you know, selfishness and arrogance in a way. You know, I'm incapable of doing things to please other people. I can't do it, you know.
Okay. After I've listened to your first to the first songs of Future Bites, I felt something really special, but I was unable to put this into words. Maybe 2 weeks later, I've listened to the latest AC/DC album. Then I knew what it was. I listened to the AC/DC album, you get exactly what you expect. You get the riffs, you get the vocals, you get the drums, and this puts you back in a history, you know, back in time. And then now I have the right words for it. This album, The Future Bites, is a today and tomorrow album. That doesn't bring you, this connects me to PT or something like this. This is something completely new. And this is what I really like. This is today, this is my words, today album.
That's really nice to hear. I mean, obviously that's really nice to hear. I think one of the things I would admit I have been guilty of in perhaps some of my previous records is being a little bit nostalgic for the past. So, for example, To the Bone was definitely looking back to the 80s, and The Raven That Refused to Sing was definitely looking back to the sort of heyday of 70s conceptual rock music and progressive rock music. And my first album, Henties, was looking back to sort of shoegazer music and post-punk music. And I think what I wanted with The Future Bites was exactly what you've just said. I wanted to make a record that could only exist now, that felt like it was completely of its time. And in a way, that could be a dangerous thing, because you could end up making a record that will sound very dated in 5 years from now. But I mean, you can never plan for those things anyway. Yeah. I mean, I like to think the record will be timeless and will still sound relevant in 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now. But you can't ever plan for those things. I think a lot of that is to do with you know, just good fortune, really. But definitely, I feel like this album is, unlike perhaps some of my previous records, sounds completely un-nostalgic. It sounds completely of the now.
Right away, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's really nice that I feel like you picked up on that. And I that's the way I wanted it to be. Yeah, for sure.
Great. Also on your new album, I was, who? Elton John? I said, wow, what's that? What was it like working with Elton?
He was absolutely delightful to work with. You know, I think a lot of people talk about Elton John and they say he's still very passionate about music and he's still looking for new music. He's still interested in new music. And I can absolutely confirm that. I mean, he already knew who I was, which I was very flattered by. He was someone who seemed to respect what I did. And he's one of my heroes, one of my musical heroes. So to have someone like that collaborate with me on the Personal Shopper song, albeit he's not singing or playing, he's just talking. But he was so kind of passionate and enthusiastic about doing it right. He wasn't just like, oh, I'll do this in 2 minutes just to get it done. You know, he kept calling me up and saying, should we do this and should we do that? And are you happy with this? And are you happy with that? And for those that don't know, he kind of reads this shopping list in the middle of Personal Shopper. I mean, I kind of wanted him because he's like the most famous shopper on earth, really. And he reads this list of kind of first world consumer items, among other things. He'd stuff too. But anyway, the main thing is he reads this list of shopping items, and he was very focused on making that list exactly the way he wanted it to be, because there were certain things he didn't want to say. Like originally I had in the list, I had some stuff about mobile phones, and he said, I've never owned a mobile phone. I hate mobile phones. I'm not saying that. So we had to take that, and we had to find other things to put in there that he did feel comfortable saying. So I can sort of say that I've, you know, it's as close as I will ever get to sort of writing a song with Elton John, was collaborating with him on this kind of bizarre shopping list. But he was absolutely amazing to work with. He's been so positive and enthusiastic about the whole project.
Great. Speaking about collaborations, I think maybe I'm wrong, but this is an album with nearly no other musicians on. You play all the instruments?
Not all. I mean, the guitar is all me, which is almost unheard of for me. Certainly in the last 10 years, it's almost unheard of for me to play most of the guitar myself. I've tended to hire superstar guitar players, and I didn't want to do that now. I think I fell out of love slightly with the sort of muso, the classic rock muso sort of thing. I fell out of love quite a bit with the guitar anyway. I mean, I was definitely more interested in working with electronic sound on this record. But there is still a lot of guitar on the record. I'm being disingenuous if I say this is not a guitar record, because there is still a lot of guitar on the record, but it's all me. And I think that because of the way I think about guitar, which is not really as a guitar player, I think about the guitar as a producer and a songwriter. So I think about it as part of the texture of the music, part of the fabric of the music. And very often I'll process guitars and use them in a more kind of sound design way, not in a kind of muso showing off solo kind of way.
Yeah.
So I did all the guitar myself, did most of the keyboards, most of the bass is me, although Nick Beggs played a couple of songs where he needed someone with a bit more talent than I have for the bass. But yes, you're right. Actually, the main guests on the record are singers. There's a lot of backing singers. Obviously, there's Elton. There's the three girls that sing on Personal Shopper and Eminent Sleaze. There's also about 20 people singing on it on Self, the chorus of Self. So there's a lot of backing singers. But yes, otherwise it is mainly, and there's a drummer. There's a couple of drummers actually on the record because I can't play drums. But otherwise, it is mainly me. So it's possibly one of the most solo albums I've ever made.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
How do you do this on tour? Can you already speak about this? Who will follow you on the tour? Who's playing the bass? Who's playing the drums? Or is still?
I have some ideas. I have some people in mind. It's obviously the band is going to be a little bit different because the music is going to be a little bit different. Now, that's not to say that I'm not still going to be playing lots of my back catalogue. You know, I'll probably still go out and play Ancestral and The Raven If You Used to Sing. You know, some of my favourites will still be there. But obviously there'll be the new repertoire. And I'm also going to go back into my back catalogue and find some of the music I've made in the past that perhaps would sit nicely alongside the Future Bites material. So there's a very old Porcupine Tree piece. Actually, it's a solo piece, but I released it under the name of Porcupine Tree 29 years ago, called Voyage 34, which is a very electronic piece. It's very spacey and electronic. To me, that was one of the first songs I thought of when I thought, what could I do from my back catalogue that would actually sit well alongside the Future Bites? And I thought Voyage 34, and it's a real fan favorite. I think the fans will love me bringing that out again. So in answer to your question, I'm thinking about the kind of musicians that would perhaps be able to to transition into the more electronic material, but also still play that older stuff. Nick will be there for sure. I'm sure Nick Beggs will still be there, and Adam, probably the keyboard player, definitely still be there. Yeah, drums and guitar players. I'm still thinking about who would be right for those positions. Yeah.
Okay. The next part, I haven't listened to the whole album, that all tracks that are out, but I read that the album, and I say it only, is 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
You have so many tracks left that you could put on the album. What was the reason to make an album with this length? Because I think this is a plan also, or?
Well, it's 42 minutes, and you're absolutely right. That was something I was very determined that this album would be no more than 45 minutes. Now, I've talked a lot over the last 5 years, particularly. I've talked a lot about how I felt albums were becoming quantity over quality, and they were becoming too long. And that particularly in the age of social media and the internet, people simply don't have the attention spans anymore. I'm not even sure they ever did. I'm not even sure that we ever did have the attention span to listen to albums of more than 40 minutes. And to me, it seems like it's no coincidence when you look at the lists, always these lists of the best albums of all time, the top 100 classic albums of all time. Most of them come from the great vinyl era. With a few exceptions, depending on the website or the magazine you're reading. Obviously, Pitchfork might have a lot more kind of contemporary hip hop albums and things like that. But generally speaking, when you look at rock forums, the list of classic albums, they almost all come from the era of the vinyl, 40-minute vinyl record.